I was a fiend before I became a teen. I melted microphones instead of cones of ice cream. Music orientated, so when hip-hop was originated, it fitted like pieces of puzzle, complicated. I grab the mic and try to say yes, y'all. They try to take it and say that I'm too small. That's cool, cause I don't get upset. I kick a hole in the speaker Pull the plug, then I jet. Back to the lab without a mic to grab, and then I add all the rhymes I had. One after the other one, then I make another one. So this the opposite, ask if the brother's done. I get a craving like a fiend for nicotine, but I don't need a cigarette, know what I mean? I'm raging, ripping up the stage, and don't it sound amazing? Because every rhyme is made and thought of, because it's sort of an addiction, magnetized by mixing. Vocals, vocabulary, your verses, you're stuck in. Mic is a Drano, volcanoes erupting. Rhymes overflowing, constantly growing. Everything is written in the code so it can coincide. My thoughts are guide. 48 tracks to slide. The invincible microphone fiend Rakim. Spread the word, cause I'm in. EFF ECT EFF ECT, a smooth operator operating correctly. But back to the problem. I gotta have it, you can't solve it, silly rabbit. The prescription is a hypertone that's thorough. It's thorough. When I fiend for a microphone like heroin. As soon as the bass kicks, I need a fix. Give me a stage and a mic and a mix, and I'll put you in a mood, or is it a state of unawareness? Be awareness, the reanimator. A lethal weapon assassinate if the people ain't stepping. See a part of me that you never seen. When I fiended for a microphone, I'm the microphone fiend. After 12, I'm worse than a gremlin. Feed me hip-hop and I start trembling. The thriller suspense is intense, you're horrified, but this ain't the cinemas or tales from the dark side. By any means necessary. By any means necessary. By any means necessary. This is what has to be done. Make way, cause here I come. My DJ cuts material. Grand Imperial. It's a must that I bust any mic you're handing me. It's inherited, it runs in the family. I wrote the rhyme. I wrote the rhyme that broke the bull's back. And if that don't slow him up, I carry a full pack. Now I don't want to have to let off. You should have kept off. You didn't keep the stage warm. Step off. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to see pastime hobby about to be taken to the maximum. I can't relax. See, I'm hype as a hypochondriac because of raps be one hell of an antidote. Some you can't smoke more than dope. You try to move away, but you can't. You're broke. More than cracked up. You should have backed up. For those who act up, need to be more than smacked up. Any MC, entertainment. I got a torture chamber. One-on-one, and I'm the remainder. So close your eyes and hold your breath. I'ma hit you with the blow of death. And before you go, you remember your scene. The fiend of a microphone. I'm the microphone fiend. That first song was by Eric B. and Rakim, by way of us. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that plot destruction. The source of death's construction. in the field, the body's burning as the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind, poison in their brainwashed mind. Oh Lord, yeah. Politicians hide themselves away. They only started the war, and why should they go out to fight? They leave that up to the poor. And time will tell about their power mind. Making war just for fun. And treating people just like pawns in chess. Wait till the judgment day comes. Now when darkness world stops turning, ashes where the bodies burning, and no more war pigs have the power. And the goddess struck the hour. Day of judgment, Yahweh calling. On their knees, war pigs. Rolling, begging mercy for their sin. Satan laughing spreads his wing. Satan laughing spreads his wing. Satan laughing spreads his wing.
Thank you very much. A big hand for Kaleigh and Ben for that performance again. Before I forget to do so, next week Angela Sawyer will be here and performing solo with Andrew Klinkman, one of the co-curators for Option. Will be interviewing Angela. So today you're stuck with me. My name's Ken Vandermark, and I'd like to thank ESS for doing the Option series for a long time now. It's been many, many years, so their support of the music has been very profound, not just on this series, but a lot of the other programming and projects they work on. So please support ESS if you can. My first question is actually kind of for both of you, if we can take it one at a time. As I understand it, you've been working together kind of centered on a duo, but expanding it out in different kinds of ways, both in concert and in collaboration. And I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit, because in my conversations with both of you, there's like a very fascinating approach to, for lack of a better word, creative strategy in regards to how you find audiences, bring people into a room, document work that are very unique, and really like to talk to both of you a little bit about your thoughts on that, maybe starting with you, Kaleigh, both because the concerts you do, everyone seems to have a different kind of approach, that they're connected, but everyone's really has a different nature to it. And also in the recording process, like how you're putting together the documentation of the work and the way you approach it in the studio. Maybe start with you, Kaleigh.
I think a lot of this, the concepts, how we approach things, a lot is guided by Ben. His kind of thoughts, approaches, like, let's try this, let's try that. And, we both have room to explore within our own sounds, but I don't know. I mean, he has so many different setups, too. So it's not just this, like, static saxophone and drums thing, right? And now I've introduced this into our playing as well. As of earlier this year, March, April, we had a performance where I played this for the first time live since 2018 when I studied it in Ghana. Well, no, I take that back. Probably 2019 in grad school. But I hadn't played this in a long time. But so now this is part of it as well. But I mean, he has so many setups, so many different things, like sounds to pull from, that it can really make things dynamic. But really, I don't know. This is hard for me to answer because I feel like we like co-think about things, but I think that you just like kind of help us springboard ideas like faster than what I can necessarily think about.
I got a kid, so I ain't got no time.
How does that make sense?
Well, I think so. I mean, to kind of pick up with what you're saying, I think one thing that Kaleigh might be leaving out is that early on we had this conversation about a term that we came up with, a phrase, and we're not sure. It was like in a tsunami of language, which was diasporic excavation, which was basically to say that, like, as, I don't know, mixed people in the U.S. Who have, I would say, Afro-diasporic excavation, yes. Who have precarious relationships with, like, African background in this country, rather than it being, like, all black family reunions all the time. Like, being at an all black family reunion and looking at like me is weird. And then being at, like, my mom's family reunion and being me is weird. So, like, we started to bond over that real quick. And it wasn't like a question of identity. It was more a question of representation, and representation as also being presentation. So once we started thinking about, like, what are the presentational opportunities we have with the music, that's when I feel like shit really kind of, like, broke apart. And the rules, it became much less rule bound, or like, how long is it going to take us to achieve, like, interesting music or music that gratified us, both in rehearsal. And that, I mean, I will say that as a, like, I'm a fan first. That will always, and I think in this network, like, even though there's people are huge fans and huge heads of records and they're so knowledgeable, like baseball stat nerd level musician, everybody leads with like, I'm a composer. And I'm like, no, I'm a fan first. And so as a fan, I really think about what that fan or audience experience is first. And like, is this the shit that's going to like blow somebody's mind? Like, because I know all those shows, like I know the shows where I leave dry, and I know the shows where like I look like the Grateful Dead logo and I have a lightning bolt going through my skull, which I'm like, yeah, more of that kind of electrification of feeling and inspiration. Like when you leave a show and it's late and you still want to go home and make work, to me that's like the highest level of like, no, I don't want to go to the bar, I want to go to the studio, or I want to like go write down my thoughts. So I think we were really directed towards like, how can we go towards that vibe each time? And then we should say that our third, our like major compatriot, Jaribu Shahid, is not with us today because he'll be here July 30th for the Option series. So Jaribu has all of the knowledge and language and all the things too. And so the way that Jaribu talks about it, and I think I'm going to step on one of his lines right now, is he talks about it as like Afro-American ritual music. So like he really, like we'll be in the basement and he's like, yeah, this ritual right now. And I'm like, oh shit, I need to, we are, but it's that serious, right? And that's somebody who started playing with Sun Ra in 78. So you can't dispute that. It's undisputed. So
yeah, I feel like just real quick, I'm still learning a lot about, I mean, I wasn't necessarily thinking about presentation when we started making music together. For me, it was like, well, I'm interested in these things. I'm interested in like, how do I take these experiences in Ghana or my own experiences being black and the weird kind of things about being biracial and put that into sound. And he's thinking about presentation, and then Jaribu's thinking about something else. So for me, I still think I'm like learning a lot about this process, and I have space to be myself, to, you know, contribute my sound and my ideas, but I really feel like I'm still learning a lot, which is why it was hard for me to answer that question.
Also learning.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, that's an answer to a question. And I'd like to just jump onto the recording aspect of what you guys are working on, because to me, the strategy, and talking more specifically with Ben about this, because I've been in communication with him longer, how you think about documenting work that includes improvisation as a major factor, but working in a studio and using the studio as a tool, which is different than most experiences I've had working in recording. I was invited to work on their recording project and do some stuff with them outside of Detroit. And there's like a lot of recording going on. You know, we've been talking, there's lots of either digital or physical copies of material coming out. And if you would put it into words a little bit, Ben, like the way you think about key recordings, why you want to make a record now, what you want it to be about. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because to me it's really unique and kind of important, I think.
Okay. Well, I think the big thing is that, again, as a fan, take someone like Jaribu, for instance. So I'm prepping everybody for the Jaribu conversation. Jaribu's on like 3 certified amazing recordings. One is Oracy, Positive Truth, like a very small, like super Afro liberation record from Detroit. He's on This Dance Is for Steve McCall, and he's also on another Detroit record called Kins. And he's on a lot of other stuff as well, but like those 3 records are pretty much like, they're like their own genre. And I mean, This Dance Is for Steve McCall is like, that's like some of the high watermark of music. So to be involved with that, the way that I thought of it originally was like, and this goes back to like before I met Bill Dixon in Milford, or well, I was already working with maybe about the same time. But the fact that you kind of can't choose your audience, but you can choose who you're in conversation with, right? So if you're doing that through recordings and you're saying like, I'm going to make a recording that's really, the strategy is to make it at that level. Well, that's just you have to work on it differently. And sometimes that takes longer, sometimes that takes shorter. And I tried the approach with my band Graveyards, with John Olson from Wolf Eyes. I mean, we were together for like on and off for 20 years. And during like 1 3-year period, we had like more than 75 recordings. And so that's a very process-based work. And you can pick out, you're not supposed to listen to all that shit. You're definitely not supposed to listen to all those recordings. But if you pick out like 9, you'll have your own picture of what the band sounds like and what the experience is of the band. So then I think that when you're trying to make a record as a fan, and you're trying to basically make it like certifiably amazing and remarkable, you have to get really beyond certain things that sometimes hold us back in terms of strategizing, talking about our deeper meaning or our deeper goals, which I think for me, everybody will say this, but the deeper goal is just to touch people. And it's to have the same effect that art changed my life, art and music. So some of those records, like Jerome Cooper, Predictability of Unpredictability. I mean, Jerome Cooper never had money in his whole life. He was always struggling. That music touched me so much. So for me, it's like the amount of gratitude that I have to that one person, and there's 100 people like him, where it's just like, I can play that whole record. I can hum it. I can sing it. It's so much a part of how I think about things. And if your goal is to touch people like that, that's a very different goal than like making a record or putting out a record. For me, it's really, a record is a record, and you're trying to produce exchange the same way that you would do in a live set. So that's always end up being my driver. And for many years, I couldn't say that, partially because I was working with, I think, peers who were like my age, and it was harder to kind of get everybody to go at once because there's kind of a competition or, well, my ideas too. And I'm like, your ideas, let's do them. What are they? Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just like, we're not going to do your ideas. And I'm like, so we're just not going to do anything, right? We're just going to play like mediocre improv for the rest of our life. Like, can we please move on from that modality? Which, that's tough for me because sometimes you have to say, hey, can you just play that one part of the thing you do to get something better? Because we're not, we're all, none of us is Cecil Taylor. That's the way I always think about it. Like, if, people are like, this recording's amazing. I'm like, well, then what's Cecil Taylor? If this is amazing, then we have to come up with new words for Cecil Taylor as, again, the high watermark of a certain kind of creative exploration and investigation, which is something I can't do it because I know I'm not Cecil. But that doesn't mean that I can't push towards that goal or end and encourage, especially the young people that I work with, Kaleigh Erez, leader of the clapping choir, who's playing here in August. Lemuel Mark, who some of y'all might have seen at the Green Mill with Ken last year. They're just like down. They're just like, oh, this is how we're supposed to do it to get to the Cecil level? So no one told me that when I was 20. They were like, I'll give you $50 and you can make a CDR. And I was like, okay. Give me the 50 first, That's a different model than trying to be Cecil or trying to move into the space of articulating selfhood that way.
And just from a practical, practice standpoint, what are the kinds of things you guys have been doing on this particular recording project you've been working on for a while now? What are the things that you could use as examples of translating that set of concepts into practice in the studio that's different than, we're going to make a record? Can you give some concrete examples of that? I think it would be, those are mysteries that shouldn't be revealed.
No, I think the big thing is like the first smart thing we did was we hired you in Jaribu.
Well, at least Jaribu, yeah.
No, but then there's learning, right? So for me, I'm a bit older. Kaleigh's very early in her, let's say, process. and then slash career, because those are two different things, right? Two radically different things. But a lot of times the career starts getting bigger. Like you start, like, it's like you highlight it and you keep doing the type bigger, and career gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and process and exploration get kind of smaller and smaller, mashed out by virtue of having to gig. And I tried it that way. So part of what I learned, especially from Dixon, like Bill has a lot of students on his recordings. He worked with students. He like really figured out how to do that, as opposed to someone like Milford, who didn't work with anybody, basically. He was like, yep, Albert Eiler, Derek Bailey, and a couple people you never heard of, basically, who are only on Milford records, which is very tight and strategic in a way, compared with someone where it's like Stephen Haynes, who, if anybody knows Stephen Haynes made 2 records in the last 10 years. One's called Parisia, and the other one I think is called Pomegranate, which are like 2 of the most amazing jazz improv records. It's William Parker, Warren Smith, the God Body, and this younger guy, Ben Stapp, on tuba. And these are amazing records, but he couldn't have made those records had he not worked with Dixon. So I'm not Bill Dixon. I'm not putting myself in with Bill Dixon. But at the same time, when I was Kaleigh's age, even when I would get hired, it was kind of like, well, I'm already paying you, so I don't want to teach you. So I would say in terms of like our goals, like we bring in smart people that we can learn from all the time. I mean, when we're with Jaribu, we're learning. It's school. And he's not like, you know, there's no ruler. He's not slapping our knuckles. But he's like, how are we going to get to this high level? Because he's on all these certified records. He's had these experiences with Roscoe, with Sun Ra, with David Murray, with Jerry Allen. He's on the first, trio record, Jerry Allen's first trio record. That's like, how else are you going to get those, the folkloric part of this material, how are you going to get it to transfer amongst us? So for me, I'm like, well, let me put Lem next to Jaribu. And then I'm a little bit taking myself out of the mix, same with Kaleigh. So now Kaleigh has her own relationship with Jaribu, rather than it's like, you can only play under these terms. And, that's the kind of cutting contest bullshit. And it's not exploratory. It's not generous. It's not bringing people up. So the goal of that in the record kind of produces the sound in a way. Or, because as you know, being in the studio with all of us together, we also don't privilege, nobody's ideas are privileged. Right? Yep. So Kaleigh will come up with a line, and I'll be like, what about this rhythm? And she'll be like, yeah, maybe try another one. And then I try, that's a very polite way of saying, that's not the shit that's going to make this move. So then I try another one, and vice versa. I'll say, I play this line. And she's like, this is major. And then Ken's not going to like this when he shows up. And sure enough, you guys are like, why did you put this in a major key?
Also because I knew I wouldn't like it. It's hard.
Yeah, thanks for not blaming me.
I was trying to, use them as a whipping post,
I couldn't do that.
I'd like to jump to a topic which is very interesting to me, is the Midwest as a creative presence. And I wanted to ask you a little bit, Kaleigh, if you could talk about the current scene in Detroit, which I know very little about, unfortunately, in the history of Detroit music. Aside from some key individuals in history, I really, there's huge gaps, which I'm very excited that Ben's going to be talking to Jaribu Shahid at the end of this month. I encourage you to come out to that for sure. That's going to be great. Talking about maybe the back history, but if you could talk about now a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, the thing that sticks out to me so much when I think about this is I feel like the Detroit scene hasn't fully recovered from the pandemic. Before the pandemic, there was a session every other week at this bar called Trixie's, and the session was called Fire Music Mondays. And
where Dave Rempis and I are playing tomorrow. Dave Rempis.
Nice plug.
If anybody's in Detroit.
Yeah, so it would always be on Mondays, and I mean, I started playing in the scene in 2018, so going into my second year of grad school at University of Michigan. Ann Arbor is very close, so easy for me to get to and from Detroit. And so I would, even if I wasn't playing at Fire Music Monday, I would go a lot. And it was like a Monday night. I'd always have classes on Tuesday morning. I'd get home at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., but like that was where, for me, especially at the time, the scene felt like it was. The free, weird, just the improvised music scene really like felt like it lived there. And of course people had gigs, different places and whatnot. But just to go into some like backstory, the person that, someone that I played with a lot pre-pandemic, the person that ran that scene, he's a nurse in his day job. And so when the pandemic happened, he went from like a pre-op, post-op nurse to like, I'm in the like emergency room, And so it took until last October, Ben and I played the first one back from, I remember I played Fire Music Monday in February of 2020, and that was the last time I played it. And then the first one back after the pandemic was October of 2022. And now it's only once a month. And so the scene feels like, where is it? There's times when I can't go on Mondays because it's only one time to go now, once a month. So that kind of is what the scene feels like to me at the moment. Plus I do a lot more project-based work with Ben, Jaribu, even my own, like before Ben and I met each other, which we met each other because of Kevin Riley, Relative Pitch Records.
Shout out Kevin.
Yeah, he was talking to me about, putting some stuff out, and he's like, oh, you're in Detroit, you got to know Ben. And so then, Ben and I got together, started playing, and that's just kind of how it all happened. But so yeah, even before, playing with Ben, I was doing a little bit more project-based stuff, some gig stuff, but the Trixies wasn't back yet. And now someone else runs the session. It's not the person that used to do it before the pandemic. So that's kind of where it feels like now. But also, I mean, the scene in Detroit, and I didn't fully think about this in the beginning, but over time, like into, me moving to Detroit and then really being there more and more and kind of like seeing things on the ground even more than when I was in grad school. It's very white. Even the straight ahead jazz scene, like it's very, like there's pockets, at least in the free scene, there's like pockets. In the straight ahead scene, sometimes it's just a divide. Sometimes it's just like segregated, like white bands, all white bands, versus like some mixed groups. And I mean, it's not really intentional, but Wayne State, for example, there's a jazz program there, and up until 2 years ago or so, they didn't have black faculty in their jazz department. So, in Detroit. And so, like, there's a lot of, like, white people going into that, just the straight ahead scene, right? Going into that college and coming out, and, like, that's what they know, that's what they're used to, that's what they're around in school, and so that kind of perpetuates outside of the institution. So, and it's in the free scene,
but
too.
I think all that's going to be solved now that there's no affirmative action.
Oh, my God. Oh, man. So at a point, I was like, wow, I need to, like, who are the black people? Who are the people of color in the improvised music scene in Detroit? Like, how can I play with them? Where are they? Who are the bass players? Who are the drummers? Who were, like, the other horn players? So I started after, before the pandemic, really thinking about, like, how can I play with people that look like me? Detroit is an 82% black city. Why is the scene so white, And it didn't really dawn on me for a while, but I started, it started rubbing at me. And then I started playing with a friend in a duo context. He's from Chicago, actually. I'm repping his city now, Nova Zai. So he's a producer, percussionist. And so I have a record out with him. And then, kind of through the pandemic, we worked together. And then, so that was one thing. And I was, like, really desperately seeking, like, a bass player. Also, like, where are the women at? Exactly. Women of color in the scene? Like, there's not a black woman bass player besides Marion Hayden, who is my elder, who is someone that I learned from, but she's in the straight ahead scene, right? So she's not necessarily going to be someone I can call for, like, this kind of stuff, right? Drummers, I don't know if I know a single woman drummer besides Galen McKinney, who's also of Marion's age. They're my elders, also straight ahead. So in this particular scene, like, there are women, but in terms of, putting together rhythm section. Like I can't do an all women band, certainly not all women of color, so I started kind of trying to figure out like how to navigate that in the scene. And I feel kind of detached in a way, just because, the Trixie situation isn't back in full swing as it used to be, and doing more project-based stuff. But I don't know. That's kind of where I am now. But I know that things continue to evolve and new people come. I mean, a lot of people come from U of M now, graduates from the music school there, which I'm one of those people too. But there's more and more people coming in and leaving, and it's influx. So it's not like it's going to be like this forever, but it's been like that for as long as I've been around.
Okay, well, hopefully this kind of activity of cross-pollination between Detroit and Chicago is going to be happening more. Like you said, Dave coming to Detroit and playing, Mimi invited to work with you guys here now. This kind of stuff happening, that's going to make both scenes more vibrant, this kind of thing. So hopefully this is little steps towards big change. I have one more question, and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience. I'm supposed to repeat those questions so it gets recorded. Not that you're inarticulate, it's just that I have to talk into the microphone. But the question I want to ask, because as a fan of music too, I'm a fan of history, and a lot of history doesn't get written down, so oral history is really important. And you're one of the few people I know personally who spent extensive time with Milford Graves and Bill Dixon band. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about their individuality as artists, what you got from those experiences. I know that's a lot, and we don't have 2 days, but if a little time to talk about those figures, because a lot of people here maybe not even know who they are, which should change.
Well, I mean, both of those men kept their own counsel, so I should start there. I studied with Milford at school. Bill lived down the street with me. I ended up recording with him, kind of almost, he was like threatening me. Like, we're going to do a recording with Evan and Warren Smith and this, and you're going to play timpani. And I was like, cool. Like, I'll be there. Like, you want me to carry your suitcase? I don't care. And then it never materialized, or things didn't work. And then he was like, well, we should just do something else. So I ended up recording with him and Aaron Siegel, who was doesn't really play music so much. He's mostly a composer, like a legit composer. But for those of you who know Braxton's Ghost Trance band, he was the drummer in that band in the 2000s, like up to, I don't know, whenever Ghost Trance stopped being a thing, like the kind of Mary Halverson, Jessica Pavone, that like sextet to octet. All those recordings are amazing, which were mostly, if not all, Wesleyan students. So Aaron had already worked with Dixon a little bit. So the thing about, if I could say, one thing about both of those men is that one time they asked Fred Sandback, and again, I'm not putting myself in with Fred Sandback, but they were like, could you speak to your relationship with Dan Flavin and Donald Judd? And he said, well, both men are great oaks under which I hope to be an acorn, right? So with Milford, with Prof, I think one thing, Jake McGinsky, if you all haven't seen Full Mantis, the film that he made about Milford Graves, it's incredible. And Jake tells a great story on a recent like NTS thing with Paul Camo in the UK. And Paul I don't know if he has seen the film, but maybe he just didn't vibe with Prof very much, because he was like asking like, so what did you guys talk about? And like Jake and I, we talk pretty much every day, because we also have kids the same age, so we're just on the phone like, guess what Luch did? Guess what Junie did? Check out this thing that I made on, like, whatever, like we're just constantly shaking it back and forth. And we were, I would say, over about like 15 years, we were the only people who ended up in Milford's kind of circle as students. And Jake really became Prof's amanuensis. Like, he's really like handling it, making sure a lot of this stuff got recorded. So, and when he drove down to, like, when he had the final edit of the film, he called Prof, and Milford really liked to talk on the phone. Call me on the telephone. And then you talk to him for like an hour and a half. Yeah, man. And he's just chopping it up. And he's great. I mean, there's some people here in the audience that have been on the phone with him, and they know that he's long-winded. He's a great storyteller. He's hilarious. And so he was like, well, why don't you bring me the edit? And Jake was kind of like, well, it's like rush hour, and I'm in Greenfield, Mass., and you're in Queens. And he was like, well, so it'd be dark when you get here, and we'll watch it in the garage. So he goes down there and like puts up a sheet, and they pull the back seat out of the van, and Jake, Prof, and Lois, his wife, who he was married to for like 60 years, they all sit down on the back seat of a couch, and it's like 95 degrees outside. So however hot it was, this is in his temple. In the garage, they watch it, and silence the whole time. And the credits roll, screen goes black, and then it goes blue, at the end of the card. And he goes, yeah, that's me up there, man. And that's it. Like, that's the way that's as close you're going to get to a compliment from Prof, right? So you really have to have your own he's like, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to give you these little tools. If you can't figure this out, he gives you seeds. If you can't plant it and figure out how to grow it and then harvest it, that's on you. I gave you seeds, man. Like, he's very, and it's like, that sounds very cone-like and kind of romantic, and that there's like but it doesn't really go past that. There's not the part where he like picks you up, which is good, because that's a way for him not to suffer fools. Dixon is much the same way, but because of the nature of the language of his orchestrations, there's always a lot of people around, right? And because both men can produce so much information and have so much in their brain, I get something, Stephen Haynes gets something, like so many people get something just by virtue of being on a record with Dixon. Or like I talked to John Voight about it, and he was like, oh yeah, that was like one of the best 5 months of my life or something. And when you look at Ben Young made a book called Dixonia, which is called the biodiscography, which is kind of expensive, but if you like this, even to like, if you like books, I would suggest you get it, because it's such a weird way to build a timeline. It will say like, we played at Option, these people were in the audience. I remember Dawood was there. I remember Tom Lowry was there, and so all of a sudden you get a sense of who was in the room, and then you'll say like, oh, they were like, Cerrone was playing cello that day, right? And then Dixon will just say like maybe sometimes a sentence about it, and just be like, yeah, they wanted to show my painting, so we also had a performance, and you get this sense of the continuum. But again, those are two men who made a lot of certified records, like very serious, indisputable, genre-bending, like points of, like real lodestars that you can look at and say, I mean, you can build a career out of just intents and purposes. That's a model for a genre of music. Bobby music, Children of the Forest, those are genres. Those aren't just like one records. And I mean, in the case of Cecil, he also does that too. He'll just like, yeah, here's another. And this is a good one, because one time they asked Bruce Nauman what he thought of Rachel Harrison, because Bruce Nauman made this one piece that's just the negative space. It's called like Negative Space Under the Chair, or some like very clear, pedantic Bruce Nauman title. And someone asked them like what he thought of Rachel Harrison, who's made these monumental projects out of the same idea. And he said, oh, it seems like she's had a good career out of that one idea I had. So, I mean, it's like those men, they produce so much information. So for me, again, Acorn status. I'm happy with that. And if you haven't, I support Ben Young, buy that book. Support Jake. It's on Criterion now because it's fancy. The Mantis movie. It's an incredible film. And on Criterion, I don't work for Criterion, but I feel like I'm really like helping them out right now. There's a bunch of small films that Jake made independently with his partner Sarah Lanzalotta, and those films are fucking incredible too. They're just like little short essays. So that's about all I can say about those two.
That's pretty damn good. Thank you very much. Any questions from the audience? I'll take a couple. I know it's been a full afternoon, but yeah, way in the blue cap. Yeah. Sorry.
Kaleigh, I was wondering if you could talk about the instrument you played and your studies around.
Question about the gear and your studies in Ghana. To Kaleigh.
Okay, this instrument is called a gyl, spelled Gyil. It is an instrument from the Upper West region of Ghana. There are 12 or 13 regions in Ghana. So I went to Ghana in grad school. I did this program, a graduate certificate program at the University of Michigan through the Center of War Performance Studies. So it's performance studies is like the curriculum. That's not there's a word I'm looking for. And part of that program was it was a cohort of grad students, interdisciplinary. So there were dancers in my cohort. There were people in the School of Information in my cohort. And performance studies is really just like the study of human behavior. So it can really be across any field. And so for me, we all got funding. There was a small cohort, 10 to 12 people, and we all had funding built into this. And they wanted us to go abroad. They wanted us to design research that took us somewhere else to a different culture. And so kind of what performance studies is like, it's ethnography, but it's really challenging how, what's the word I'm looking, people that studied, I can't think of like the...
Anthropology?
Yes, thank you. Jeez, sorry, performance brain right now. So anthropology, a really, really long time ago, honestly not even that long ago, to be honest, it was, armchair anthropologists were people that read about a place and thought they knew something about it, right? And so performance studies was like really trying to bridge that gap of, in order to understand something about a people, about a place, you have to go there. It's as much about theory and practice, it's really bridging those two. And one of the articles, I think the first one for that class is like an introduction, was this Dwight Conquergood article. He taught at maybe Northwestern. He's passed now. But he said this quote from someone, and it was to break the binary between theory and practice, that those two things are married. And so that was kind of how I went to Ghana. My research question was impossible, which I know now, but my research question was, could the predominance of men in West African music, for me specifically in Ghana, have led to the predominance of men in jazz music? It's complicated. There's a lot more to it than just, some surface level things, but I was able to study this instrument for 3 weeks when I was there. And then I was there for a month. I went to Cape Coast and ended up studying with a female master drummer, which in Cape Coast there were 2. In Ghana there are very few, so it was really cool to get to study with her, and she was kind of training me as a master drummer. And so at the end of this week with them, I led the drum and dance troupe as the master drummer. And so this was like a portion of that, but it was also studying drums, djembe, ewe drums, dancing, all of this music. Music and dance are synonymous. They're not separated like they are here. Even in the Caribbean, they're still very inextricably linked. And so it was just kind of tying all these things together. And I learned a lot of songs on this. And I didn't have access to one for a long time. And so serendipitously, a friend of mine had one. And so I started playing it and bringing it back into, relearning the songs that I learned there. I took a lot of recordings, so I was able to just relearn things from ear, plus there's still some muscle memory there. And then introduced this to our thing, and then ended up seeing my gyl teacher when I was in New York at the same time that they were, and talked to him, and so he was able to send me this gyl before he went back to Ghana.
With no wrapping?
No, it was just in a box. Just a box. And so one of the pegs broke off, so we jerry-rigged it today, and with a sweet piece of rebar. And but he's actually going to be back in October, so he'll be able to bring a replacement piece for me. So, yeah, Gil, Gyil. Bernard Woma was a Gil master. Look him up on YouTube. My teacher was Jerome Balsab. I got to Ghana a month to the day after Bernard passed. So it was pretty wild. But Jerome was like that close second. And you'll find videos of Jerome and Bernard.
There's a duo.
On funeral
duo.
Funeral music. It's crazy. Oh. So yeah, Jerome Balsab.
Killing.
Bernard Woma. Gil, definitely check it out. Beautiful instrument. Thank you for that question.
One more question and we'll call it. Anyway, yeah.
I'm curious, Kaleigh. Who do you play music for?
Me.
Yeah.
Just to document the question. The question was, Kaleigh, who do you play music for?
A lot of times me. It comes... Okay, just background to that. For me, I studied classical saxophone for my undergrad. I have my bachelor's degree is in classical saxophone. And there was a lot of times in that degree that... I studied it, I started taking saxophone lessons when I was like 11, and all the way up until 2017 when I finished my undergrad degree. And in my degree itself, I didn't so much feel this before college, but definitely in college, I started to feel like this isn't like me. This doesn't resonate with me. My teacher would be like, well, whose recording are you referencing? Who are you trying to sound like? And it's like, I'm trying to sound like myself. I'm not trying to sound like someone, like Don Cinta from the 60s, right? Like that style of classical saxophone playing is just, it's not how people play anymore. And then I ended up going to grad school at University of Michigan, and I wasn't in the classical department at all. I got a master's in improvisation, which was in the jazz and contemporary improvisation department. And that is where I was able to like really play like myself, play for myself. For me, like I've always, when I was younger, would always improvise. It was really an escape from just traumatic things that happened in my upbringing, and it's a place of relief for me. It's catharsis for me, and so a lot of times, like that's what I'm playing through my instrument. That's what and all my other life experiences. So for me, a lot of times it's like Ben said earlier, like this, we're trying to touch people with this music. And that's, I'm playing for me. I'm playing from very deep places within myself, but also to be able to harness that and put it into sound and connect with someone, which, I've gotten some pretty crazy feedback from people over the years who have heard me play. One friend that heard me was like, when you sang through the saxophone, I felt like I was in my mother's arms. So I play for myself. I play for the inner child in me in the hopes that comes out and reaches someone. So it's not just me, but it's like little me. I'm playing for like the little Kaleigh in there. Yeah.
Okay. Kaleigh Wilder, Ben Hall. Sorry, Ben.
I have an addition. Something you just said. Obviously that question, but it was thinking about sound, and to your question about Milford and Bill. And maybe it will help musicians to hear this, because I think this is actually perhaps the most important thing that those two dudes taught me. And I'll start it with a very short anecdote about Bill. Bill was like, how are you introducing vibes into your playing? And I was like, well, I'm broke, man. Like, I can barely afford this, zildjian cymbal I got here. And he was like, well, Barry Altschul uses vibes in his kit. And I was like, who's talking about Barry Altschul right now? Like, how am I supposed to compete with that? And I said, well, like I'm doing this and that. And he said, well, what can be more important than your sound, right? And I think two things, Milford and Bill, there's a lot of stuff they did not agree on. But one thing they both said, almost word for word, was that if you don't have your own sound in this music, you ain't shit. And I think about that all the time.
You're right. Ben Hall, Kaleigh Wilder, thanks to ESS. Thanks for all you being here. Come back. Angela Sawyer next week is going to talk to Andrew Klinkman, and it keeps rolling from there. Thank you.